closest in here, among them, two of them go out after council, every single council meeting. They often agree. There are two of the people who are running tonight. They often have the same points of view. They all go out for pizza or whatever or something, and I'm told this, I've never actually seen it, but I think that they are rather social. They hang out after the meetings and they talk and they chat, and that doesn't matter to me one bit. Not one bit. I think that's part of the beauty of being involved politically, and of being politically involved and politically engaged and being citizens. And if you become socially close and you develop political alliances, that's what happens when you're involved in the inner workings or the outer edges of your political community. That is not a bad thing. So I don't hold it against those people who are close with each other and even those that I know, because they've expressed it multiple times that they don't like the mayor, who have spoken publicly with some some strong negativity toward the mayor, toward certain councils, toward certain council people. I still think that if they were the controller, that they would be obliged by the law to follow the laws. As far as that phrase, competent accountant, we've all batted that around as well, and I would hope that if there's something to add, that our council solicitor would add it. But from what we've learned, what I've learned, is it does not mean someone who has a degree in accounting. And in fact, we have had controllers who served for a number of years who were not accountants. It does mean that you need to be someone with impeccable character. You need to be someone who can understand money, who can handle money, who can learn things quickly on the job and with the help of the deputy controller. You've got to be sharp, and you've definitely got to have some very strong knowledge of business, and if not an insider's perspective on government, enough of a perspective on government that once you are inside, you're not going to be lost. So unless our solicitor shares with us something more detailed than that, I think competent is somewhat of a subjective term. And this is the word accountant with a little case A, not a big case A. So I think we're looking for someone who can account for monies, for objects, for assets, and who can do so pretty quickly, pretty sharp, has a good sense of honesty and integrity for himself and for others. And that's the standard that I'm using, which would not preclude anyone, certainly not a particular one or two or three people from having the right to my consideration.
Mr. Evans.
Councilman Schutte?
Thank you. As Mr. Carroll pointed out, I am an attorney, and I did do some research into this. While the term competent accountant is not explained in the third-class city code, thank you, state legislature, on that. Our Supreme Court did weigh in on this topic way back in 1942, not in relation to the third-class city code, but the borough code. The case is Commonwealth. It's Commonwealth in relation to Adams versus Stevens. In that case, the Supreme Court said there was a contention of whether a individual who was elected to borough controller was a competent accountant, and whether that person also met the residency requirement. The Supreme Court didn't address it in great detail, but they did say, we do not think that we need to concern ourselves with the contention that the respondent was not a competent accountant. He had such knowledge of accounts as men engaged in managing their own business possess, and we think that this requirement of the Act was a directory and not a mandatory provision, and one for the voters themselves to determine. They didn't really give us any more guidance than that. I would argue before court, if I was before court, that the same drafters drafted both codes, that we would be in the same situation. This is the Supreme Court, highest court in the state of Pennsylvania, and I believe that they're calling it a directory provision, which for the layperson is a optional provision. It's not a mandatory provision, and they're leaving it for the voters to decide.
Could you read the part again, the same as when they compare it to something?
Well, in this case, the individual owned a business and was a businessman. And he said, the court says, Justice Thompson said, he had such knowledge of accounts as men engaged in managing their own business possess, and we think that this requirement of the act was a directory and not a mandatory provision, and one for the voters themselves to determine. I don't think we have to concern ourselves with any of these individuals being competent accountants, because I believe they all are. I've done some additional research. I looked at course studies. Some of the candidates alluded to that tonight. I believe everyone who applied for this position has taken accounting courses, statistics courses, economics courses, and I believe that they all meet this definition of competent accountant, and I believe that we should not concern ourselves anymore with that tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Rashidi. I think it's time we move into the nominations, agenda item number 5. I'll review the procedures as we move through here. Nominations, I will ask members of council for nominations. A member of council may nominate a qualified individual who is not on the list of 5 candidates. Once we have all nominations, I'll ask for a motion to close. Second, nominations will be closed. At that point, I will then open it up for discussion from council on the nominations. We can then discuss the candidates after they've been nominated before we move to the election. So at this time, I will ask for nominations from council for the position of controller.
Each council must nominate one, or can any council nominate more than one? How does that work?
You don't have to. I'll open up. If you'd like to offer nomination, you can. You can offer more than one nomination, yes. We'll go down once everyone's had a chance to nominate. If you would like to nominate a second candidate, you may.
Let me jump in here. In looking at Robert's Rules of Order, as usual, we're partially correct. A member can nominate more than one person for the position. However, if there is an objection made, then Robert's Rules of Control, that's section 45, and then you would only be able to nominate one
If an objection was made by whom?
by a member of council. It says the following. Let me read it to you. No second is required, but sometimes one or more members will second a nomination to indicate endorsement. No one can nominate more than one person for a given office if any objection is made until every member wishing to nominate has had an opportunity to do so.
Okay, so we go down the line, everyone gets an opportunity, and then we nominate a second person if you wish.
Yes.
So is it your intention, President Evans, to actually go down the line and to call names?
I can do that.
Okay.
I'll start. Okay, we'll move down. We'll go down in roll call order. There is no requirement to nominate somebody. You may not nominate anyone. You may nominate any of the 5 candidates. Anyone else you feel is a competent, qualified individual who's not on the list. And nominations do not need a second. Councilwoman Lewinsky?
Thank you. I would like to nominate Mr. David DiGiacinto.
I would advise the chair that Mr. DiGiacinto, pursuant to my memorandum of February 10th, is now prohibited from any involvement in this process whatsoever.
Okay. Any states behind the table or should?
I think that's his choice.
Okay. Okay, we have a nomination for Councilman DiGiacinto, who was originally candidate, withdrew the names, did not make a presentation. He did submit questions, the answers to our questions. You are able to nominate someone, a qualified individual who's not on the list of candidates. So according to our rules, he is able to be nominated. And at this point, is not able to vote for himself or anyone else,
Or participate.
or participate in any questioning of any other candidates or in any debate or open discussion in the process.
That's correct.
Okay. Councilman DiGiacinto has been nominated. Councilwoman Dalton?
I would like to nominate Bill Shire.
Councilman Donches?
My nomination would be as Mrs. Polinsky, Mr. DiGiacinto.
Councilman Raschuti?
I'd like to nominate George Yasso.
Councilman Reynolds?
No nomination.
Okay. I do not need to make a nomination. Are there any more nominations we have? Councilman DiGiacinto?
Has two. Mr. Shire has one, and George Yasso
It
has
doesn't
one.
matter how
Yeah.
many.
There are
No,
three
right,
names.
doesn't matter, I'm just checking how many names are nominated.
I would like to nominate Bob Fanning.
Any more nominations? That's what I'm going with, yeah. So there are no further nominations. I'll accept a motion and a second to close nominations.
I'll move, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Move in a second. Please call the roll on the motion to close nominations.
Mrs. Polinsky,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dolan,
Aye.
Mr. Donches,
Aye.
Mr. Raschuti,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye. Nominations are closed. We now move to discussion from council on the nominations. There are 4 candidates nominated. Comments? Council. Mr. Reynolds, Councilman Reynolds.
Just a question. Am I able to ask any questions of Mr. DiGiacinto at this point?
Yes.
Yes, you may.
It is, if I may, it is, I believe, my advice to the chair, as the podium is sacred, that council be given the freest of opportunity to question, so that this is a completely transparent and open process and uniform.
Okay. Councilman DiGiacinto, can I ask you to move up there?
He says you have to.
Those microphones go to the-
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councilman Reynolds?
Yes, I just have one question for you, Mr. DiGiacinto. You were certainly qualified for the position. I would just like to ask what we had received the memo last week when you had kind of withdrew your name. And if you could just kind of explain what the thinking was, because I know that, like I said, I certainly think you're qualified. You certainly have lots of experience. In this particular regard, though, I mean, I was kind of confused because you had kind of let us know you were interested in the position, and then it appears now as if at least some of my colleagues, which is perfectly fine. But if you could just kind of straighten up that confusion, I'd appreciate it.
First off, one of the advantages and disadvantages of being on council and sort of an insider, you can hear some things you like or see some things you like and not hear some things you don't like. And I, quite frankly, as you know, when I was debating whether I was going to submit my name, I did talk to most people on council. When I was in the role of trying to decide. I gauged some of the reactions I got from those members of council, and tried to understand better where my position was. I observed also, again, just because I'm on council, the elections that took place for the president, vice president. I kind of saw how that went. To be totally transparent, I did not feel comfortable that I would get 4 votes. I knew that I would not be able to vote. I had a strong suspicion that I would not be able to vote. And however, I did 2 things. In that letter, I did state that I still feel that I would like to serve in the role for the remaining 2 years. I did run for this position in 2007, and I think many of you remember that it was a, I guess, pretty hotly contested race back then.
That's when I got my $100 from you.
Yeah.
I remember well.
Yeah, did not lose by a whole lot. Probably lost based on my campaign prowess, which was limited, and you know, bounced back 2 years later to run for council. So I think that in itself shows the interest I had in serving in the city of Bethlehem in an elected role. I don't think any of us could predict that Ms. Holland was going to leave. I think it was a surprise to everyone, including her deputy. And so I did not really, you know, contemplate this was going to occur, and felt that since I did consider myself for the role once before, that I would have a strong interest in serving again in that position. Again, I did not get a strong sense intuitively that I was going to get the support. I did state that I would still like to serve in the role, and I think I did follow up on all 21 of the questions, not 19, just to show that I am considered, or still would like to be considered and interested. I also knew that there was going to be nominations from the floor as a possibility. So, again, that's part of the inside review.
Thank you. Questions? That was my only question.
Thank you, Councilman Reynolds. Any more questions for Councilman DiGiacinto?
No.
Councilwoman Dolan?
I have to return to Councilman Reynolds' question because it's still, I'm going to quote a line from Shakespeare, not Shakespeare, sorry, Hitchcock. In a Hitchcock film, a character says, if it doesn't gel, then it ain't aspic. Shows my age. Anyway, and something ain't gelling is the other part of the line. If you wanted to be controller, you could have run 2 years ago. You chose to run for council. If you wanted to be controller, you could have stuck at it. Like, I mean, all of the people here want to be controller, and they didn't have that inside knowledge that they were or weren't going to have 4 votes. And I'm telling you that I don't know how you knew you weren't going to have 4 votes, because I don't. I mean, I don't think I was even adequately polled by you. So early, you asked my opinion, and I couldn't give you a solid answer on that. I mean, I told you some of my pat answers, which is I never promised my vote. But, you know, that I supported you, and I thought you'd be a great candidate. As far as I knew, the best candidate that I could imagine. But that was as good as I could do at that point. So you came back here to this position, which seems to me, to be honest, you know, really comfortable compared to what the other folks had to go through. You did answer the questions, but you got a chance to participate in the writing of them and in the influencing of the writing of them. So I don't understand. I mean, I think that you, with the highest integrity, and I just need to hear from you why you would think that that's fair compared to what the other gentlemen have gone through. Why do you think that this is a fair
I think
process?
other than the 3 or 4 minutes they spoke up here, you're now answering, I'm answering your questions more than some candidates got tonight already. And quite frankly, I did respond to all of the requirements that was put forth by council, including an extensive letter of qualifications, which I would have reiterated tonight and talked about in my 2-3 minutes, but it was clearly stated in a letter. I think one of the candidates mentioned that there was an extensive bunch of questions asked. I went the extra 9 yards, Mrs. Dolan, and answered all 21. I didn't stop at 19, and submitted the resume as well. So I don't think I really skipped out on any particular part of the process at this point. And back to your other comments about, again, the insider's knowledge can be dangerous because it leads you to believe that if you are trying for something, that maybe that the people there are not quite in your camp. Yeah, that was my impressions.
But knowing that, that you were going to be nominated tonight, and accepting that nomination, is it because you feel differently than you felt before? Do you feel now that you have 4 votes?
I don't think I've ever backed off the position that I still feel I can fill that role, that I'd like to fill that role. Never backed off.
No, not that. And I agree with you. You could fill the role, and you shouldn't back down on that. But do you feel as if now you have 4 votes?
I don't know. I think I'm going back to your statement that you made earlier. I don't think any of us know if anybody here has 4 votes right now.
So then what's the difference between accepting the nomination at this point and having stuck with it when you first put your hat in the ring?
Because I still want to be the controller.
It ain't aspect. It doesn't make sense to me, but I hear you. Okay, thank you.
And I also think I'm one of the more qualified candidates up here. I think I also stated that in one of my comments. Based on my experience, both in life, business, government, I've heard everybody speak here. I've read all the letters. I read the answers. And until you get through that process, sometimes, Mr. Dolan, you don't realize where you're at in that cycle. But I can't convince everybody here to vote for me based on those qualifications alone. You know that that's not always the winning formula.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, is that it? Let me just check real quick, thanks. Any more questions for Councilman DiGiacinto? Okay, we'll bring it back over to the chair then. I'll go to the bathroom. That's all right.
All right, we have 4 nominations that are out there at this point. We are moving into discussion of the 4 nominees. Before we move to election, and we can start, anybody would like to open up discussion? Councilor Reynolds.
Point of order, question for Solicitor Spadoni. So now that Mr. DiGiacinto is he's a candidate, so throughout this process, he will not be able to vote?
He cannot participate and he may not vote.
Okay, thank you.
If you get withdrawals and we have a person field, he is a sitting council member, but he is nominated and has not indicated, at least to my eye, that he's not a candidate. He is a candidate, he is out.
But he's only able to withdraw once, correct?
I think at this point, he could decline the nomination, but I don't think he's done that.
No, I'm saying like theoretically, if he withdraws, there's no going back then, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
May I ask a question also?
Sure.
Attorney Spadoni, not everything is in Robert's rules, as we know. And I don't think that how you vote for controller is in Robert's rules. There's some references in the classic code, but how was this process determined, the process of that anyone who's nominated, where did that come from? What part of, I guess, Robert's rules does that come from?
Came from section 45, nominations and elections in Robert's rules.
And is that referencing council people or any elections?
Any election.
Any election?
As you are aware, and if I may, I wrote a memo today anticipating this concern, as you were in the vanguard with the change in the council rules for president and vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, I had indicated that the nominations would read a second. However, I misread it because that was for ordinances, resolutions, and motions. It was not for nominations and elections. And if you look at my memorandum, there is rule, and I think it's rule 13, that where it is not addressed in council rules, Robert's rules govern. Hence my directive, or at least advice to President Evans, as we met last night and again this morning.
So I'll just pick your brain then on Robert's rules. So somewhere in Robert's rules, there's something that states that nominations may come from the floor, and it states when that occurs or when that is to occur. I mean, to have the nominations. So in other words, all the folks who were nominated got up and spoke, and then they were all questioned, and then at that point, another nomination can come in.
Yes. And I would just say that we've spent, again, with our city clerk who does yeoman's work and President Evans, we have established this protocol pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, we can comment on anything that we wish.
I'd like to now open up the discussion of people. We had nominations. Anyone like to speak about their nominee or any other topics of discussion with regard before we move into the election? When we move into the election, it's going to be a roll call vote calling out the names. So if you have anything you'd like to voice support or open engage in any other discussion with reference to any of the nominees or any of the candidates, I think this would be the time to do that. Councilwoman Miller.
I'd just like to start by, you hear this from politicians so much, but thanking everyone. I mean, I really, truly thank you for coming out. There was a lot of work that went into these applications. And for those of you who don't have any political experience at all, it's tough to get up there and to speak extemporaneously. And I admired you. Everyone was really and pretty much equally well spoken, which was really quite something. And before I move into anything specific, I hope that this is not a deterrent to any of you for actually throwing your hat in the ring and running for an office. I think there's a potential for every single person who got out to run for an office and to win. I wanted to comment on the two gentlemen that I nominated. Although they're very different, one thing that they have in common is their consistent devotion to paying attention to the process. And I sometimes think that they're both crazy because they don't just come to city council meetings. Bob Fenning, I know, goes to county council, keeps us informed on county council. Bill Shire has a citizens group, and I think it goes to pension board meetings. I'm not sure, but zoning board meetings, and often are more engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on than we are. It does, on the other hand, they do have a disadvantage, which is that we know a lot about them. We know how opinionated they can be, each one differently, and how they can be opinionated. And the part of me that's reticent, and I have reticence toward all of these candidates, but I would say that the part of me that's has reticence toward both Mr. Shire and Mr. Fenning would be knowing that they can both be pretty tough, and at least one of them sort of prides himself sometimes on being maybe a little more tough than you expect him to be. And so knowing that about them, that piece has me still up in the air as to which of the four would be the most appropriate to vote for. But I really have to recommend them both very highly. To separate them a bit, Mr. Shire was a part of our committee, a special ad hoc committee to come up with council's new rules. And he was so helpful. It makes me think of what was said by him at school board meetings, where he wasn't just punitive. He was very helpful, and you're very right about that. And Mr. Fenning, in terms of if you were looking for, sort of like a mind for numbers and sort of the quintessential numbers man, person who really understands numbers and the ability to manipulate them in his head and to make sense of things that to many of us don't make sense, Bob Fenning's a genius. I mean, really, really, really bright in that regard. So just in case you don't hear it from me or from any of us enough, I like seeing you get involved. I like the fact that you are involved, and I thank you for your commitment and support you both in your efforts, both here for this job and in other positions that you might seek down the road if this one doesn't pan out. And I only want to speak on those two at this moment.
Would you like to speak on any candidates on the side?
Before we move to the election, I would like to make a couple of points, Mr. President. I'll make my points and thoughts at this time before we move to the election. I plan to support, to begin with, Bill Shire. I've seen Bill in action many times. First time I saw Bill, I was sitting over there, and he was at a zoning hearing board. It was very impressive in the way he supported neighbors that really showed he had no agenda. He was there to support the neighborhood, to support what was happening, to keep Bethlehem a great place. I've seen him at the zoning hearing board do that. I've seen him do that at the planning commission, at city council meetings, and at committee meetings. He's on the board of the Bethlehem Public Library, the South Bethlehem Historical Society. He spends a tremendous amount of time working in Bethlehem, and the theme of the things I'm talking about, that he doesn't get dollars for any of that. He comes out, he puts himself out, puts thought into it, puts work into it, and doesn't get paid, and doesn't carry an agenda in any one of those areas. I think it's a clear, round summary of what he stands for. He can be critical at times. We see that on the different meetings. We see it at council meetings quite often, but he can be very fair. I see the fact that he pays incredible attention to detail. I think he's a great thinker. When you look at his resume, it really goes unparalleled when you're looking at a valedictorian from Liberty High School, a Princeton grad, someone spent time at London School of Economics and graduate time at MIT. I think those are all very impressive. What I think separates him is his experience. In this particular case, it's a 22-month position. It's a short-term position. It starts in 2 weeks. I think anyone that steps into this role needs to be up and running almost immediately. There are several candidates that were quite impressed, but I think there's a tremendous amount of upside available for them. And if it was a typical election cycle, they might have a month or two to prepare themselves, a couple months to get ready to take the position, and it was a 4-year position. My thoughts might be directed or thought out a little bit differently. But in this case, we're talking about someone that has government activities, tremendous amount of government experience. He's worked with qualitative and quantitative analysis. He has economics and statistical work. From a time frame he is available. I also took note of his comments and thoughts in the area of running for re-election. I thought they were interesting. He spoke on something that council has debated before about running for re-election from an appointed positions that give you an unfair advantage as an incumbent. So that's something that I also took into consideration. A little lighter than everything else, but I think in the whole package, Bill presents quite a package for us to consider. I do, the other 3 candidates, I'll speak quickly about them. Mr. Fenning also is qualified. I would agree. I think he's very worthy of consideration. Third Class City Code calls for competent accountant. We talked about the definition, what that is or isn't it. Bottom line, he is one of the one CPA we have in our pool of candidates. He has an MBA in accounting from Michigan, 20 years as a professor at Lehigh, other accounting projects positions, and he is in tune with the financials of our city. So I think that makes him a strong candidate. I think all 4 are. When I heard from Mr. Yalso, I was quite impressed with your presentation. I think it was very clear. It's a fresh perspective, it's a new perspective. He comes in with a strong education. His answers were very solid, and it's something I think, if he is qualified, I think he'll do a fine job for the city if he is the one chosen when this election ends. Councilman DiGiacinto was also nominated through a little bit different process. Is he qualified? Yeah, I do believe he is. And also carries a very impressive academic background, a very, very impressive professional credentials. I really value having him on council. My concern there is more of a philosophical issue. The fact that there was an election 2 years ago for controller and council, and that at that time he chose the role of council. He won. I'm glad he won. I'm glad he's on council, and I enjoy working with him on council. I think the obligation is there, and that's just my thought. I know everyone has different considerations on that piece of the puzzle, but in this case, that we're not working with an election, we're not working with the will of the voters, we're working with the will of council, and I think this puts us in a tough spot. It's tough to buy into it if we open the appointments to everybody, but then end up selecting someone from our own ranks, as qualified as that person might be, to a position he chose not to run for from a body that he was elected to. So I think there's a lot of twists and turns that make that a little bit more complex. Needless to say, if he is elected and that's the will of council, we put Councilman DiGiacinto in that seat. He also would be qualified. Any other comments from council before we move to the election process? Sure.
To the council. Through you?
To the council.
But through you. Council President Evans, it seems important to me that if someone on council wished to nominate someone, went to the effort to nominate someone, that they ought to explain to the council why they wish to nominate. I realize they cannot be compelled, but I heard more about folks that weren't nominated from you than I have from people who nominated. So it would be my hope that people who nominated others would give some explanation for why they felt it was important to nominate them.
Okay. Let that to the will of any particular councilman. Any other
It
members?
looks like there's a hand here.
Mr. Evans,
Councilman Rashidi, you'd like to speak?
Ms. Dolan, I'd be glad to explain why I nominated George Yasso. I think Mr. Yasso brings valuable educational experience to this role. His resume speaks for itself. He has background in financial planning, which I think is valuable in this area. This position does sit on the pension board and does have some input in the pensions for our city employees. I think that would be valuable experience. I think most important is the word you brought up, impartial. I think Mr. Yasso is impartial. And I don't want to say anything negative about other candidates, but they do have views out there. They've made views at council. I don't, for me, that I bring in their impartiality, and it's something I can't leave out. I can't forget what I hear. So I think Mr. Yasso is one of the most impartial candidates we have here, and that's why I'm supporting him.
Thank you, Mr. Rashidi. Mr. Reynolds.
Even though I didn't nominate someone, I think I'm able to make comments, correct?
Absolutely.
So then I will also be supporting on Mr. Yasso. When I take a look, and I was, as Councilman Dolan said, I really have been kind of up in the air about this whole thing. And I think that every time I took a look at some of the resumes and the letters of interest, and as I said before, Mr. DiGiacinto is up there. He is certainly qualified. And just to echo, like I definitely never said I was not supporting anybody. So I think when I look at Mr. Yasso when he brings to the table, I think that it is an independent voice. I think that one of the things, there were two things that really answered or kind of pushed me in one direction. That's when I looked at the responses to his questions. There were a couple things in there as far as some of the ideas that he thought he could bring to the controller's office that I'm sure are not things that that will be comfortable with the administration. I think that it's the idea of being independent and fair. It's not like there were things in there that I think would be looked forward to by people in City Hall. I think that it would be he would strike the right balance between kind of making the trains run on time a little bit better, and also at the same time not being too negative about some of the things. The other thing too that kind of put over the edge was how he included in his questions and the answers that he was with all hopes wanting to keep Mr. Allman around. I think one thing that this body agrees on is over the last couple of years, our controller, Meg Holland, has done a good job, and she's done a good job of running the position in a way and conducting it in a role that we were comfortable with. Like, she came to us with information, she brought up information, she sent us reports, she said, you want to look at this, you want to look at this. And I know that Mr. Allman was a big part of that. And I think that they've started some things that have certainly saved money in the city over the last couple of years. And he was the only candidate that included in the question responses that he would absolutely be willing to retain him. I know that other candidates had said, sit down, and that is fair as well. And it's certainly, I would never tell someone the way to answer that question. But I think that as far as me kind of being on the fence there, when he had kind of spoke highly of Mr. Allman, as well as some of the things that the Controller's Office has started, I think that for us, for the remaining 2 years here, I think that was consistent with what the goal of the Controller's Office is, as well as I felt that his kind of explanation of his role as a controller was one that I was consistent with, that I think would be independent, impartial, fair. And I think that one thing that came out as well is, never been involved with these things before. I think sometimes we kind of, when the seven of us and, the people that come to these meetings, sometimes we know all of this. We kind of come with a certain set of expectations and beliefs about things that have happened, but we're not able to always think outside the box. And I think that bringing someone in from the outside might do some good in this particular case. So I'll be supporting Mr. Yasso. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Councilman Donches.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be supporting Councilman DiGiacinto. First, let me just say with all the candidates, I appreciate all the time and effort that you put into the resume and coming before members of City Council with your presentation. I think the 4 candidates that are been nominated are qualified, but I'm supporting Mr. DiGiacinto because I do believe that what's important here is when I look at the depth and breadth of his resume and his experience in business with budgeting, oversight, accounting practicing, audits, pensions, which is extremely important, debt refinancing, investment banking, I think it's very important, since this is a 2-year term, that there's not much of a learning curve, as President Evans made reference to, and I agree with that completely. So I think that Mr. DiGiacinto would be able to come in and start right away. I think it's very important to keep Mr. Allman too, but that would be the decision of the controller. I think Meg Holland did a very good job during her tenure, changing an office after so many years of Mr. DeCrosta. But I think that